and I'm going to start with the Institute for Women in Trade, Technology, and Science. And I've been a principal investigator actually. This is our fourth National Science Foundation grant, and it's actually to build upon our last grant working with two-year colleges and helping them increase the number of women in science, technology, engineering, and math. Gordon Snyder is the co-principal investigator on the grant. He's in the back of the room. And I am going to be talking today about how you can ensure your female students are successful in the lab. And Gabby Snyder, who is a student of computer science, is actually also going to be doing a short presentation. But before we get started, I want to get a sense of how many of you actually teach and have labs?
What do you mean by labs?
Labs. If you're not sure, you don't have one, probably. So that happens. How many of you oversee people who have labs? Okay. So almost everybody's here. Welcome. Come on in. And so let me tell you what we're going to do in the next 50 minutes. I'm going to have Gabby give a short presentation. Then I'm going to go into what the strategies are. And then we'll have about 5 minutes. I don't get a lot of time. About 5 minutes in the end to do question and answer. Okay? So that is going to be, if you have questions during this, please write them down. We'll do our best. We'll stay after, whatever. Okay? So, in terms of getting started, I want to introduce Gabby Snyder. And come on, Ida. And she is a student at Mount Holyoke. She's a junior, and she has a 3.6 in computer science. And so, in short, she's a superstar. She's already done summer internships at Google and at Apple. And so, she's pretty quick. But we're going to start out by having her talk about her experience in her first programming class. That was your first programming class, wasn't it? In high school. And here's a hint. This is not what you want to do if you want to keep students in your class. And so I'm going to turn it over to Gabby so she can tell you a little bit about her experience in her first programming class.
Yeah, so I took my first programming class back in 10th grade in high school. It was a very small class, 10 students, 7 were male, 3 were female. And the first assignment that I got in this class, programming assignment, was basically working with RPM calculator and stack notation. From there, we progressed on to about a month and a half worth of 8051 assembly simulator programming. Not exactly the most welcoming assignment ever. And what was interesting about this programming class was that in addition to kind of setting the bar high from the 8 in terms of, what we were supposed to comprehend in programming, there was also an interesting classroom environment. As I said earlier, the number of males in the classroom outnumbered the number of females, and there were several comments and jokes made that were discriminatory in this classroom environment. And the professors told them, please stop, that's not polite. But the impact was there. And within the first 3 months of the course, 5 students dropped, the 2 other females in this course, and 3 males. And I was good friends with both of the other females in this course, and they told me that they just didn't feel comfortable. It was too much work, and they didn't feel like they belonged. This was something that I actually talked them both into taking, because I knew that computer science was my passion from a long, long time ago. And I told them, you should try it out. It's a lot of fun, you get to work with computers, and they just couldn't handle it. It was too much for them. So it was really sad, and this is kind of a trend that I've noticed throughout what I've done since then. So it's something that Dawn is here to kind of teach you how to avoid. So, yeah.
Good, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
So one of the reasons that I asked Gabby to share her experience is because often when I do this training, and I'm not sure this is true for any of you, but often I do this training just even a couple of months ago, and what I hear is, oh, actually the girls do better than the boys in the class, or they're more, and, Gabby's only a junior, so this was only a few years ago that this happened to her, and of course, what we're hoping for is that Gabby stuck it out, because she already knew that she wanted to go into computer science. And she had two parents who are engineers, both her mother and her father. But we want every student to have the opportunity, not just the superstars, don't we? And we want to create an environment where you don't have to stick it out and be the superstar in order to stay in. And we want that not only for our female students, but for our male students. Isn't that the case? And so what I can tell you that was so exciting in our last National Science Foundation project that was highlighted by NSF was that wherever we increase the retention of the female students, you know what? We also increase the retention of the male students. Now, in the time that we have today, I'm just going to be able to share with you at the top level some of those specific strategies related to the lab. They were not limited to the lab, but that's a really important area for students to be successful in STEM, isn't it? Yeah. And so that's why we're focusing on this. And so the strategies that I'm giving you we're focusing on females, that's our focus, but just know that they also help the male students as well. And a little bit later, I'll be showing you some information in that regard. Okay, thank you. So we're going to start out by talking about how to teach the female learning style. And I'm going to say something that's going to shock everybody in this room. Males and females overall as a group have different learning styles, and what appeals to them is different. Now, I know some of you are saying, well, that wasn't true for me, and maybe you're a woman in STEM, or maybe you know a woman in STEM who that's not true for. But if we're ever going to get beyond the 3%, the 5%, the 8%, then we have to appeal to all females, don't we? And that's also going to appeal to more males. And so we're going to talk about how to do that. Because if we only have STEM in its present form, then we know that actually doesn't appeal to a lot of students right now. And so that's part of what we're going to be looking at. What kinds of things need to change. And I'm also going to be talking a little bit later about the yellow sheet that you've all gotten, our Women Tech Educators Online Training, that is one of the things that is a part of our current National Science Foundation project. So I'll talk about that a little bit later. Okay, so how do you ensure your female students are successful in the lab? Two major things that I want to share with you. And one is that the thing that really works best is for them to have hands-on problems to start with. And so often in classes, things are starting with a very micro picture. Gabby described, I forget what it's called.
RPA calculator, assembly language.
And so I asked her, what is that? And since I was not a computer science major, and she explained to me it's a very minute part of computer science. And all the research shows, guess what? That it's the context and understanding how things connect, the bigger picture, that really engages female students and appeals to them. And so if you're a female student and your very first exposure is what you just described, then what's going to happen? You think you don't understand. It's a very minute thing. Carnegie Mellon, one of the preeminent computer science programs has one of the preeminent computer science programs in the country, did a major study on what interests female students. They actually increased the number of female students to 42% from single digits. And the head of the CF department worked with the head of the Women's Studies department. they ended up writing a book called Unlocking the Computer Clubhouse. Have any of you read that book? And one of the things that they really emphasize is how important it is for female students to feel that they're actually using the technology to solve a problem. That's their main driver. Whereas for the male students, often the technology itself was intrinsically exciting. They described it being like a toy. However, that's not true for female students. So if what you do is start out with, as just a small picture, then you're going to lose most of your female students. And so what they actually did at Carnegie Mellon is often the writing code is the very first thing. And of course, that's very tedious. It's not big picture. Initially, if you haven't done it before, if you have a one period off, the whole thing can't work, it doesn't work. And so they changed the sequencing of that. And they put context first. There's lots of examples of it. There's an amazing, amazing book that just came out in 2010. I met the authors when I was speaking at American Society for Engineering Education's conference in Vancouver. This summer, I'm so excited because it's actually called the Gender Inclusive Engineering Education. It's at the university level, but it certainly applies to all levels. And they talk about how they increase enrollment and also retention rates of women, and also to improve things for men as well, because males also have about a half dropout rate in the U.S. in engineering education. And the primary thing that was done was these kinds of hands-on problems, and they go into great detail about how to do it. They have some great information on the web if you want to Google that, and they describe it. One of the things that they describe, for example, in that book is Purdue has had a program for quite a few years that actually increased the percentage of females in mechanical engineering education, which is one of the more male-dominated areas of engineering, from 10 to 12% to 20%. And so some examples of those types of cases were computer-controlled toys for children with disabilities. They also give an example in particular with Purdue where they worked to help provide environmental controls for museums to make sure that their exhibits would be preserved. And so they give example again and again where the very first thing that the students have to do is do a case and figure it out. So you're going from big picture, and guess what? That not only engages the female students, but also engages the male students as well. So that's really critical. How many of you are familiar with Design Squad? Any of you see that on PBS? If you go to pbskids.org, you can also look at episodes online, but it's a television show. And it's actually got high school kids, boys and girls, and there are some episodes that are more more appealing to females, and they have them solve problems, and they compete with each other. And one that I really remember was a young woman who was a performance artist who came to the Design Squad. And these are high school students. And she had to use prosthesis legs, and she was also wanting to do performing art in a pool. And so they had to make something that fit in with her specifications for the performing art that would also enable her to float. Did you see that one?
No.
So it was amazing. And they all show her the different designs, and then she decides which one is going to work best. It's really, really amazing. And so yet another, lots of good examples, if you want to just get an example, look and see what this looks like. From Design Squad, Sky Girls, which we actually sell Sky Girls videos in our online store, also has developed the principles of incorporating what makes for a good curriculum. And they have episodes in which girls, again, do science, technology, engineering, and math by solving problems. One that I really like is the Doggy Dog House, and that's part of one of the DVDs that we sell. And two girls in Tucson, I believe it's Tucson, Arizona, developed a dog house for their dog that's climate controlled. And they researched how to do that. Isn't that, they're doing construction. So they're doing heating, ventilation, air conditioning, and refrigeration. They're working with animals, which girls really like. And so you see there's many skills involved there. So the hands-on problem solving, and the other thing is working in pairs and groups. All the research shows that female students really, overall, as a group, prefer to do collaborative group work. And so I have one study in particular, and because this is an ICD conference, I thought it would be in particular important to share it with you. It is on pair programming. How many of you are familiar with pair programming? Okay, quite a few of you. So this has a pretty big N, which it's hard to find, so I really like that. It's from UC Santa Cruz. There were 554 students that were in this study, and they compared those who did paired programming, essentially working together to do the programming, versus more traditional independent way. And the results are dramatic. And they were both for males and females, by the way. So let me share them with you so that you can see the evidence of the difference this really makes. So those who did pair programming actually were retained in the programming course itself at a better rate, 90.8% compared to non-pairs of 80.4%. That's a 10% difference, pretty big. That's males and females together. Those who then completed had a much greater likelihood of going on to a subsequent programming course if they were in paired programming. So 84.9% versus the non-pairers of 66.7%. The pairers were the 84.9% who went on. And 51 were women and 186 were men. That's a huge difference of going on. And then, when they did a breakout on a subsequent course, again, 73.8% of the paired women versus 55.6% of the non-paired women. A huge gap. And for the men, there was also a big difference. 88% of the paired men went on to a subsequent course versus 69.4% of the unpaired men. The women who were paired were more likely than women who worked independently to end up in a computer science major. 59.5 versus 22%. That's almost a 40% difference. If that's not a vote for caring, I don't know what is,
Can I ask a question? Do you know if that's across the board in all sciences or all STEM?
I only have this study. And I've only seen one like this, which is kind of interesting. So the pairing resulted also in more confidence for both the women and the men. When they asked them about their confidence level, the women reported a 25% increase and the males a 15% increase. And I don't have time to go into it today, but when I do our full training, which I will be doing in the Women Tech online training, confidence is a big predictor of success for women. So that is really important. Now, I'm going to tell you that the National Center for Women in Technology, and you can just Google them, NCWIT, actually has as a free resource a pair programming class module, if that's something that interests any of you here. So this is the time that I have to go into this particular strategy in the short 50 minutes that we have, but suffice it to say that I know, Gabby, you didn't mention it now, but when we talked, I asked you how your labs were done in that class. And you told me that everybody worked independently. And in fact, there was no guidance even as to what should happen in the lab. People worked independently, and then they were to come back and, we called it competitive labs, essentially present their labs to each other, and then that's when questions were asked. Now, for female students, how would that be? And so then could you see why the female student might say, I don't think I get this? And is it necessarily because they couldn't get it? But when it's taught in that way, then only someone who's super highly motivated, maybe has two parents as engineers, is going to pick it up, especially when they're getting negative messages from the male students. So so part of what you have to take into account when a student says, this is too hard for me, is it taught in a way, in a learning style that is going to be digestible for that student, or most fit with their learning style. And what Gabby described actually probably only fits with the learning style of all of the people who already knew they were going to do it and have been doing it. And so that's why I say it's so important to really, analyze what is really that's too hard for me about, or this isn't for me. So pair programming, group work, starting out with cases is really critical for engaging female students and also engage a lot of male students. Okay, here's another one that those of you who are actually teaching can put into action tomorrow. Well, could be here tomorrow, but next week, or when your class starts up again, which is that overall as a group, females prefer to have the lab activity demonstrated and then to hear a lecture about it, and then to go into the lab and do it. And it was so interesting because when I did our Women Tech Educators training for one of our community colleges in our last project, they actually taught auto technology. After I did that training to the instructors, one of them, Mike Hernandez, said, "Oh, Donna, the students loved it when I used that, where I demonstrated first. A lot of times it's lecture then lab, and not the demonstration." And he said they loved it. It was in the beginning of the project. So I said, "Oh, how many female students were in your class?" Because there weren't a lot in the auto technology to start. And he said none. The male students liked it as well. And so it's interesting because our term evaluators did a survey of all of the female students across the 8 colleges that we were working with. It had an N of about 60. It was anonymous. And what they did was pare down all of the strategies that we had trained on to see if the female students had experienced them, if they experienced them, if they liked them, and if they hadn't experienced them, if they wanted to, which was really neat because we got to actually see if what we've been training on hit the classroom. And primarily it all did. And you want to know what the #1 strategy was that the female students liked? It's modeling. Isn't that interesting? So this is really a critical one, really a critical one. Okay, so another one, and I'm just zipping through these, we go into a lot more detail in our full training, to just give it to you at the top level, is the structured pairing in the group in the lab. Welcome. So if you don't take anything else away from this workshop this morning, I want you to get this, which is that if you let students select on their own, and you're the only female student in the class, or one of only a couple, and there's 30 students in the class, what's going to happen to the female students? They're going to be left out or picked last. That's going to happen to any student who's different, right? Okay, so if you don't get anything else, what I want you to get is that you need to structure it whenever you do parent or group work. Do not let students select on their own. Most important thing. And there's a number of ways to do it. I'll go into it at the top level. We go into a lot more detail in the full training. So the #1 thing is that if you have the opportunity in the beginning of the class, you may want to pair the female students together initially and then have them, because a lot of research shows that when male and female students are together in the lab, the female students end up, what? Taking notes. And the male students hand on. So if you pair female students together initially, then they can gain the experience and the confidence before you integrate them with the male students later in the semester. Now, I'm giving you a variety of techniques. Someone says to me, I don't want to do that, Donna. That's your choice. There's a variety of things that you can do. That's one option. Another option is the driver navigator technique. And actually, Kenny Spade from Microsoft taught me this one. He actually came to one of our national trainings and participated in it and talked about some of his work specifically to engage students in programming. And so, how many of you, by the way, have students sharing equipment in the lab in your courses? Can I see show of hands? Okay, so quite a few do, so this is relevant to you. And so what he does is he actually has the student who's touching the computer and using the computer just be the navigator and the other student drives. And so, and then switches the role. Is that interesting? Now what I'm going to tell you is that you still have to make sure that one student is not doing all the work. And that ends up being part of your job with any of these strategies, that you have to monitor for that. But this will also help reduce the likelihood of having it happen. The other really big thing that you can do is you call time and switch. And so X now, and again, you've got to look to make sure that it's happening. And the other dynamic, we hear a lot about the dynamic where the male students are harassing the female students, right? We're all familiar with that. But there's another dynamic that comes up when you have very few female students in the class, or just one, and it's called overhelping. And so now you have the male students doing it all, you know, showing her completely. What's going to happen to the female student? Doesn't learn anything. And so we actually have a teacher training video that we developed, and we actually have the teacher saying that he scans his class, goes over, and he says to his male students, let the lady do it. She has to do it, you know, and so he knows about that dynamic, and it's his job, he sees it as his job to make sure that the female students are doing it, and he takes the male students aside if he sees that happen and tells them, hey, you need to let her do it. So there's both structured, never let the students left on their own, okay, there's that, but then there's the also monitoring during the lab to make sure that you don't have one of the pair taking over. Make sense? Okay. I'm going to try to do 10 minutes for questions at the end. I have so little time, I have so much. Okay, so here's another one. I don't have time to go into detail, but this is what I'm going to tell you. Overall, as a group, female students come with less hands-on experience when they come to the classroom. I do a whole module on Girls and Games that explains why there's that difference, because there's actually things, when I do the full training, because there's actually skills that you learn informally that make a big difference in your, mostly here, IT classrooms, I think. But any classroom, whether it be IT or auto technology or geographic information systems, we work with the whole gamut in our program. And so essentially there's building block skills that are quite important. So one strategy to overcome that is additional open lab time. And in our Cal Women Tech project, our last National Science Foundation project, of which we're bringing the strategies to a broader group, we found ways for additional open lab time that were both low cost and also no cost. And again, when we go into the full training, we give you a lot of details on that. And so the thing also that was important was that it was publicized that there were the additional open hours by the instructors, as well as having that put forward by the chair of the department, who really pushed that through. So the additional open lab hours really gives not only the female students, but also the male students that need to have additional time in the lab, that additional time. Because you have to figure this out, because you can't let the lab with all that expensive equipment go unmonitored, right? So, okay. So additional open lab time. So building block technology skills, I started to talk about them. It really is true that overall as a group you're going to find that your female students have less of what I call building block technology skills, less of a technology schema. But here's the good news. Those can be learned. And there's about a half dozen that we talk about in our full training. I want to talk about what tools are available to provide those skills in short order. One area, for example, is spatial reasoning. And if you don't help provide those building block skills to your students prior or at least parallel during the course, what's going to happen? They're going to feel lost the entire time. They're going to feel lost the entire time. And so it's really, really critical to provide those, and it's amazing what a difference that could make. Cheryl Sorby, who's the leader in the United States and maybe internationally, she's also doing some international work on spatial reasoning, has some studies where she compares those who have gone through her course, which she developed with NSF funding. It's maybe about a 10 or 12-hour course. The retention rate of the students was so much higher, and this is in engineering, because that's been the focus of her work, that she actually wants to do more work with community colleges. Huge difference in retention rate of female students who took the spatial reasoning course versus those who didn't. Huge difference. And guess what? There are some male students, much less, who that also helps as well, as is true for all the other building block technology skills. So, City College of San Francisco happens to be one of the colleges that we worked with, one of our sites, and we worked with their computer networking and information technology program. And I actually conducted Women Tech training for almost like 95% of their instructors. We were successful in getting, including the adjuncts, by the way. Are any of them here? Okay. They've already heard me. So they had really amazing results on retention. And you can see it's not a complete straight line, is it? So the pink are the female students, and the retention rate at baseline, and these are numbers collected by our skill evaluator, were 64%, and they ended up being at the 80, 86, 85% after the training and the project. And so the males also were at 72%. They're here at 80, 82, 82, 86. It's not, as you see, it's not a complete straight line. But overall, in the aggregate, there were significant increases for both the male and the female students. So, how did City College achieve these results? Well, when we did the training, we sort of went through, and the Women Tech Education training, we go through the knowledge base of what works on recruitment and on retention. And the participants, and in this case the instructors, came up with the plan of what they wanted to do to improve the retention rate of their students. And then I came back and actually provided them with some coaching and additional help with implementation of those strategies. And we actually looked at their numbers as well, that they could see, actually, well, is this working, or we need to do some more. And of course, when people make a plan, they're much more invested in it. And it was so exciting for them because they were actually able to see these kind of positive results. And so that's really how they achieved these kind of results. So, for example, they came up with the additional open lap time, figured out the statistics of it, etc. So, would you like to have results like these in your schools? Yes. So one of the really great things, we're going to actually have plenty of time for Q&A. I was so concerned about moving along here. One of the things that this grant provides is we have been providing, outside of our grant-funded projects for many years, our Women Tech Educators training in real time. People come from around the country to the San Francisco Bay Area where we're located, to our national trainings that are located nearby in Emeryville. In addition, I have 3 on-site trainers besides myself that go around the country and train in specific schools or school districts or sometimes statewide. And for the first time, we actually are going to be providing our training primarily to the ATE community, which is those who have advanced technology education grants from the National Science Foundation. The training in an online format. And all of you have the opportunity to participate in that today. Now, even if you're not connected to ATE, there might be the possibility, so you should still fill out an interest form if you're interested. I have so much more that I can share with you in this short time, and I would really love to have the opportunity to do that through our full training. And we are actually going to be starting the training on, we have a date, and if I look to see the exact date here, and I believe it's on your application. Thank you. February 27th, we're going to be doing it. It will be a combination of asynchronous. The online content will be asynchronous. And then, remember how I told you how important the support was, for example, to the City College of San Francisco teachers, and I help them with implementation? There will be also using teleseminar. There will also be a support component, 6 live sessions as well. And so we really are researching what is already being done. So we promise that we're making this very manageable for all of you, so it won't be a tremendous amount of time. And what I would really love everyone to do, this here, the yellow one, is the description and a lot of detail of this. The very last page is an application. You'll have to fill out an application, and like I said, primarily the spots are for ATE grantees who actually fill out the annual survey that is provided by Evaluate. And so, however, if you're outside of that realm, we might have a couple of spots for you still, so you should still fill it out, and you'll just indicate if you are an ATE grantee or not. What I'd like everybody to do right now is the white form is to indicate your interest. I'd like everybody to pull this out and to fill it out if you haven't already. Even if you're not interested, we'd like to know why, or even if you're a maybe. So just take a minute and fill that out, and then we'll go to our Q&A right after that, and we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. Sure.
So this is only for the online training. Do you have
as part of this project?
Classroom training, or?
Yeah, we have in this grant one live training, in-person training, and this particular year it's going to be in the Boston area. The details of that are being worked out. We also provide outside of this project, and by the way, the equivalent for training with follow-up support, people pay $900 a piece to come for. For the training itself is limited $600 for the live training, and then for the coaching additional. So we do have it outside of that, and each year a different part of the country. And one year I'm sure that we'll have one that MPIS is going to host, which is one of our partners, and will be in the Bay Area. This in spring of 2012. Any of you from the Boston area? Great. So we will have a live training. We're going to be talking more about that with Deborah Bovair, Gordon, and I actually tomorrow morning. And it's going to be approximately in April of 2012. But our online one is going to be great. We've been really working hard on that, and so I want to see some of you at the online training, as well as I'd be happy to see you at the real-time training. So if you can then just pass your interest form maybe to the end, and okay, so while we're doing that, does the clipboard go all the way around with, I everybody's information over there. Great. Okay. So now, I hope you have a lot of questions for me because I'm so worried about running out of time that we have like 15 minutes worth of questions. So what questions do you have?
Another question.
Yes.
One thing I've tried doing recently, and I'm not sure how successful it is, it's hard to gauge, but I'm curious of your perspective. To just, at the beginning of class, like the first day, just kind of acknowledge that there's a minority of women in my class and to try to help them feel comfortable.
Okay.
And I'm curious if you have
Sure. I do. So tell me your name.
I'm Craig Persis.
I know you've met before, Craig.
Yeah, and you're
So-
a computer science.
So one of the things that I talk about when I do bicycle training is that many times people are very well intentioned by saying, well, you know, we have some women here, we have very few women, something along the lines of what you're talking, but if you ask the women themselves, and actually we've done focus groups and we've read other people's focus groups, the women themselves, when they're one of very few, actually don't want attention drawn to them. And so, and Gabby's not, you know, she's nodding her head, so I just want to speak to that as one of.
Yeah, it's awkward. I mean, if you're singled out for whatever reason, it's awkward to be put in the spotlight like that, and especially if you're unsure about what you're doing to begin with. You know, I mean, it's like, hey, look at me, I don't know what I'm doing.
and so Craig, you know, I appreciate you asking that question, and it's hard because you actually are doing this because you care about these women and you want them to be successful, and now here I am shooting this down. But what I have found is that people are well-intentioned when they do it, but the women themselves tell me it backfires on them. And then sometimes what happens is, especially if they say, well, make sure, and I'm sorry that you don't do this particular thing, but, you know, make sure that you're, you know, polite and teach them, well, then nobody will talk to them. And, you know, everybody's sort of scared, you know, to do that. And so it's both that, and then also you're in the spotlight, and you already were in the spotlight. And so while that is well-intentioned, it's much better to do, you know, what I go into a lot of detail about how to integrate the women's success in the classroom. Some of that is the groupings and the pairings being structured, you know, teamwork, you know, there's a variety of things that you can do. Those are the kind of things that will get the male and female students working well together. So I'm so glad you asked that question. And now you know.
Thanks.
You're talking about pairing and forcing pairs so that they didn't know each other before. How do you do that? By assigning everyone a number and then going, you're number 1, you're number 30, you're here. You're number 2, you're number 29, here.
Yeah. So how many are your classes? What's your name?
That's their first person.
Okay. So Percy, if you've got 30 people in a class, that's pretty manageable. You can do that by hand. And you could, ideally would be for you to think about who might pair well together. And so think, okay, I think maybe this person would help this person, or who do you think would go well together? If that's not possible, then yes, you can do it randomly, you can count off, you could do it in advance and hand something out. But you know, it's up to you. If you have the time and you can think it through and you think that you would know who would go well together, great. If not, then count off or post it, one of those kinds of strategies. Good question. Okay. Oh, but I wanted to say one more thing before I went there. I forgot. It was in my mind. So when I was at WEPAN, Women in Engineering Proactive Network conference this year, there was a presentation by actually a mother and her son. They're both physics majors. Well, she actually was a physicist, but she was working at, I hope I'm right about this, Dartmouth, and helping with increasing diversity in their engineering program. And those classes have like 300 students, some of them. And so she would use an Excel spreadsheet to do pairing, and then there were all these factors that were taken into account. And it was quite a complicated and time-consuming spreadsheet. So her son, who was at Harvard, doing a physics PhD, which apparently ran in the family, I found out when I went to dinner with them and some other people later, had created a program specifically, and it's open source, to do this in about 5 minutes time, and you could put all the the factors in. But in a class of 30, that, it's more manageable. Obviously, you can see a class of 300, that wouldn't be manageable. So I just wanted to mention that. Okay.
So I teach a class in IT problem solving, and one of the things that those students have to do for one of the projects, which is a project pretty early on, is they have to develop a idea for a mobile app. They each have to do one PowerPoint slide and make a presentation about what their idea is, and that's the beginning of the project. And they know in advance they're competing against each other because not all the ideas will be chosen. Maybe 4 get chosen. Interestingly enough, I only usually have one woman per class in this class. We have about 25, and there's usually only one female student in the class. And I have multiple sections, and at most, there's only ever been 2 female students. Twice, though, the female student project was picked as one of the top 4, and so she became a leader. And then the other thing that I have them do is then pick their team sort of kickball style, going around. What are your thoughts on that? It has seemed to work well because they've taken sort of a leadership role, and then the male students kind of are forced to listen to them, and then that continues throughout the semester. They don't get to lead the whole semester, but they are What are your names?
Jamie. Okay. So first of all, I think it's great that you are doing something contextual right from the start, because we talked about how appealing that is to females, and so that is great. I will tell you that when you only have like one per class, you're getting the pioneers, or you're getting the ones who are going to do it regardless because they're superstars. You're getting the Gabbies of the world, and so for them, it's going to be thick. And you know what? The saying, like, women have to do twice as well in order to be, And so they're ending up being the leaders. When you have a much larger end, they're not always going to be the leaders. And so that's something to keep in mind. And so people don't understand, because I say, my goal is that we can have average women doing IT. Because there's average men that are in IT, right? Everyone gets mad at me. Well, we don't like average. But if you can only have, if you're from an underrepresented group, and you can only be a superstar and succeed from that underrepresented group, whether if you're a woman or someone with a disability, then we really haven't come too far, right? And so I want average women. So my sense is when you start getting more women, that you're going to find that they're not always the leaders. That's one thing. Here's the other thing. You're not going to like this, I'm sorry. And I'm so glad that you're doing that case kind of thing right up front. But there's a lot of research, again, I keep saying this, but we go into it in the full training a lot more, that shows that overall as a group for women, competition is a demotivator. Now, for men, it's a motivator as a group. So about 2/3 of women. Now, I personally happen to be a woman who enjoys competition. However, I understand that if I want more women and girls to be part of STEM, then there has to be a lot of collaborative opportunities. And I don't think get rid of competition, have both. And so,
The only place it is in this entire class,
actually. Okay, good. How about a collaborative? Okay, great. But I just wanted to point that out to everybody else here. We have on our website, which I hope you will all visit, iwits.org, a proven practices collection, which is soon going to be moved, actually. AT Central is going to link to it too, but if you want to just go to our proven practices collection on iwits.org, then we have an article that is from a robotics class in engineering, freshmen, and they interviewed, there was actually like 7 female students, which is a lot actually, and the rest males. And they interviewed them after the class to see what they liked and didn't like about the classes. Actually, I go into detail about the whole confidence thing, because I also measured that. It was really interesting. But in relationship to what we're talking about in competition, the female students said, well, we really liked the class, but they really didn't like the competition aspect. They built robots that were monsters, girls didn't really like that too much either, that competed and then exploded, you know. And we really liked the robotics class, but we didn't actually like that aspect. The male said we wanted more competition, and they loved robotics, they wanted it. And so this is where I started out, which is that overall as a group, males and females are different. There are some females that like robots that explode, you know. I mean, actually, I love like shoot 'em ups, okay. But I also understand that if you ever want to have a larger group, then you have to appeal to all female interests. One of the things that we sell, we're a reseller of, is Pico Crickets. And how many of you have heard of Pico Crickets? Okay, one, Gordon, my co-PI. Gabby. Okay, how many of you have heard of Lego Mindstorms? Okay, Pico Crickets do the exact same thing as Lego Mindstorms. They're made by the same MIT lab. Through a game, they teach robotics, programming skills. Lego Mindstorms are monsters, again, okay, and most female students are not interested in them. Pico Crickets, like you make a cat purr, you make a birthday cake sing. Do you see the difference? And so the point is that you can teach these things in a way that appeals to both. I don't actually advocate. I was actually on an NPR show, and they wanted me to say, like, oh, you know, we should get rid of all computer games because they're, and I would, and they really would. That was something that was going to be my role as a organization, you know. And I do think it would be good to have less violence, you know, in the games, but I'm not saying get rid of all competition or get rid of all things that are masculine. You just need to increase the spectrum to be inclusive, yeah. So.
I just wanted to say that I use Lego Mindstorms robots in my intro programming class, but we don't build them. They're already built, and they just have to program them. And most of the women say that that was their favorite part of the lab, is programming the robots to do things.
And is this at the community college level?
Yeah, college.
Well, they probably like the hands-on part. I don't know, maybe because they're older, you know. I don't know.
Yeah, but I think it would be very different if they were building them. And it was much more competitive.
Okay.
I have a follow-up question to taking the lead.
Yeah.
And I recently read a study, I recently got into with that women tend to, first of all, women take the lead because a lot of times, you know, men don't want to. They're more comfortable in a collaborative environment. And when that continues, what happens is that they tend to migrate over into more of the soft skill areas of management and get away from technology. So what's your comment on that?
Well, what I can say, and I realize that we're at the 50 minutes, so, which is that our organization, in addition to working with the education system, also works with the workplace as well. And we have been successful in that realm as well. And so just as there are things that teachers, instructors, professors can do in their classrooms that are going to make it more female-friendly, there's also things that employers can do in their environment that will also make it more female-friendly so that the women won't all migrate over to the soft skills because it's not a comfortable environment. So that's not something that teachers can do except in work-based learning experiences. We talk about that too when we do the full training. But we have to acknowledge that that's the case there as well. Good. Okay, so do I have at the end of everybody's table your white forms? Did everybody fill that out? Even if you don't want to come to the training, we'd really like to know why. Am I going to see some of you in the online training? I want everybody to raise their hand. Okay.
So Gabby, I'm in Intech, and I just want to thank you for being here and